Hey, everybody. As recruiters, we all know that hiring can be one of the most challenging parts of running a business. Whether you're a startup looking to build a dream team or a well-established company aiming to streamline your recruitment process, the right tools can make all the difference. Teamtailor is a powerful, all-in-one recruitment software your candidates and team will love. It's not just a piece of software, but a way of working. With Teamtailor, you get everything you need all in one place. Powerful analytics, an AI assistant, customizable workflows, powerful integrations, and so much more. Plus, Teamtailor is easy to use and implement with their intuitive, user-friendly interface. 94% of their users report better team collaboration, and 97% see an increase in qualified candidates. If you're focused on the candidate experience, CX is at the heart of the ATS. Just ask any of the 4 million candidates who connect with customers every month. Join the ranks of over 150,000 recruiters and more than 8,500 companies like Oatly, Porsche, and OneFlow who have transformed their recruitment with Teamtailor. Discover the new way to attract and hire top talent and see the results for yourself. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Rebel TA podcast. You're tuned in with Kevin Wheeler. Kevin is the founder of the Future of Talent Institute. Kevin, thanks for coming on.
Hey, it's great to be here. Good to see you, Brandon.
Last time I saw you was out in Vegas at HR Tech, which was fantastic to see you out and about. I think your commitment to the recruiting community is something that goes without saying, but what has you still involved after all these years?
Still trying to move the needle, still trying to create some change in the profession. And it's hard to change anything, but this profession seems very resilient to change.
I agree. There are a lot of fantastic attributes of recruiters, but being resilient through change and experiencing adversity, to me as a practitioner, a guy who works recs, that actually allows me to connect with candidates. And successful folks that have longevity in this career position the candidate in how we operate. So I agree. It's been a wild time for recruiters.
Yeah, it has. It's been a crazy year this past year, not just here, but globally. Now, I just came back from Australia, and it's very similar story there, similar story in Europe. So it's a very interesting time for the profession with AI and all the other things going on.
How do you think different markets recruit differently? So if you've been in Europe, you've been in Australia, I think conceptually we believe that those countries and regions move a little bit slower or have different processes as a result of certain legislation compared to the US market. But what do you see as maybe some similarities or differences between recruitment in Europe versus, say, your backyard, San Francisco?
Yeah. I'd say Australia is very similar in many ways to the US. They have, many of their general practices are pretty much the same as ours. I think the biggest difference there is recruiting is really a profession, where here it's a stepping stone generally to a bigger HR role or some other role in the company. You'll find a lot more lifelong recruiters in Australia than you will here. And it's a smaller market, much, much smaller market. We're talking about, a tenth the size of the US market. So the number of recruiters is a lot smaller, more longevity in their career. More professionalism in many ways than here. Europe is, again, similar in many ways to here. I do a lot in the Netherlands. France and Germany are unique places that, they do it their own way, and it's different. It's like China, which is different. But the Netherlands in particular, in the UK, more agency-driven, much more agency here. Yeah. And, much more, I'd say more, all these markets are they're smaller markets in many ways, much more, and people know each other more than here, right? We're very anonymous, which is interesting phenomena. People talk to you and they have no idea who you are as a candidate, right? If we're talking to you in the Netherlands, they would know who you were, right? Or Australia. So really different from that perspective.
You mentioned heavy reliance on agencies in the recruitment motion in Europe. Is that the case for Australia, where you're talking about longevity in career, or are you seeing more folks that are having longevity in their careers in-house?
It used to be an agency market in Australia until it changed about the year 2000. And I think about 20 years ago, it started a very rapid change into corporate recruiting from the agency world. the agency world dominated recruiting until about 2000. All right. And that's really a benchmark year. I don't know why, but it seemed to be the year of, I co-founded a company in Australia in the year 2000. And the reason was for exactly that reason, that corporate recruiting was now something they were starting to talk about, and they didn't know how to do it. So it was really an interesting time for consulting and education into that space from people moving out of agencies into the corporate world. So Australia is more like us today. Europe is still, while it's transformed some, agencies are still very important in Europe.
It's interesting you mentioned about Europe being candidates being more of a known entity, despite their strong preference for privacy and things like GDPR. So I think that's just a fascinating observation.
Yeah, I think we could have a long discussion about GDPR and the new EU AI Act, which is even worse by far than GDPR for vendors. I think it's really, again, you talk about the average new college grad, the entry person to the marketplace. I think from that perspective, privacy is important. When you get to be more senior, where you know everybody and everybody knows you, those issues kind of disappear or become much less important. Yeah.
I agree. We've already touched on a few threads that I want to pull today in our conversation. And since we're talking about Australia, why don't we go there first? So I had the privilege to study at the University of Queensland in St. Lucia back in school and had a blast. One of the things you speak about around skills and learning and development is the need to have more apprenticeship programs in the US. And that was something that I noticed when I lived abroad in Australia is there was less of that stigma for skilled labor. And there were folks that were educating and going to the university. And then there were also a large percentage of the population that was just getting into skilled trades. And it wasn't looked down upon among the peer groups and valued in society the same way it is here in the States.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And that's true in Germany in particular, but also in Europe largely. It's, for some reason, the US really focused on getting a college education would open the door to a marvelous future. And increasingly, that's not true. So there's a new awareness that, actually people that are electricians or plumbers or carpenters can do very, very well financially and otherwise. And I think people are slowly getting more respect here in the U.S. for those things, but it's very slow. And, I think 20 or 30 years ago, and I go way back to the beginning of my career, corporate education was very normal. Today, it's not normal. It's rare. People got a job in a company right out of university and were trained to do something. It was a kind of apprenticeship, even though it might have been programming or whatever it was. The company shouldered the burden of educating you. We pushed that off to the universities, and then we complain that they don't do a good job.
So when it comes to the trade market, we are still seeing ripple effects from things like NAFTA. And historically, the American narrative is college is an on-ramp for financial prosperity and to achieve middle-class financial security. We're seeing a shrinking of the middle class economically across the US. But the reality is we need these skilled trades, and generational skills are exiting the workforce. There's emerging technologies, things like TaskRabbit or platforms to find a skilled tradesman, but it's actually something that's pretty common. If you just go into your community and you say you need like handyman or you need a repair, it's a lengthy process. And there's lack of tribal knowledge being shared across community groups. And I say tribal just for lack of a better term. How do you think about the skills that our society needs from a wide lens, 30,000 foot view? How do we get more respect into those jobs just simply as people knowing how to do things?
Yeah, it's a huge topic. I mean, we could have a long discussion about the whole notion of human capital that Gary Becker at the Chicago School of Economics, proposed years ago. And that's sort of been the hallmark in America, which was simply that go to college, And that's a pathway to a great job and a great career and great. And now we've got a country filled with people with advanced degrees, even if it's associate's degree or whatever it is, that are underemployed and can't find work at all. So that model is completely wrong. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked, which is part of the backlash we're seeing politically and otherwise in America right now. We certainly do need more people in the trades, but even if we were to open up broadly apprentice programs, that's still not going to account for all the millions of people that have tertiary education and can't find work. So we have far too few jobs for the number of people that we have. And that's a huge issue that no government has yet grappled with, but I think they're going to be grappling with it big time in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be the major issue.
When it comes to higher education, we have a lot of people that have pieces of paper that say they've received an education, but we're missing the gap of skills and true knowledge and critical thinking skills and the advancement of human cognition as it applies to the world of work. The world of work is incredibly vast. There are so many sectors that are not in this little echo chamber of IT where we spend a lot of time on thought leadership and consideration as recruiting advisors, practitioners, consultants, analysts. So when we go to these events and we talk a lot about technology, we're really focusing on like one specific use case. Sometimes we get fringe cases in other areas of the S&P. But let's talk about higher education and some of the trends. Since 1980, the cost of a four-year degree is up 10%. But the quality of the product has not innovated at that scale. It's still a lecturer administering some sort of assessment that says, yes, you've earned this piece of paper. Americans inherently love prestige. They love these universities and the brands and the stories we tell about brand. Vanderbilt, for example, is going to be the first four-year institution that will top out at a K per year. How do you think about the role of prestige bias and brand and education and what it actually means?
I think we've blown that up. It got blown up a few years ago. I used to be a lecturer. I lectured for 10 years at two different universities. The enrollments have dropped to almost zero now. The number of people that have decided that university is not a career path for them is increasing rapidly, especially among men and young men. And young men historically enter college about at the same rate as women, but 2/3 of them never finish. They drop out because they look at it and say, "This is bullshit. I'm not getting anything useful out of this program." Okay, I think we forgot that 20 or 30 years ago, the primary way you got those practical skills that you talked about were in the companies that hired you. And you were hired in as a college grad with just a theoretical knowledge, right? You didn't have any particular skill. And the company took on that burden of training you and giving you that skill. And that's what's missing. We gave that up in the 80s because of shareholder value and because we really focused on making money rather than building up a workforce that was valuable and skilled, right? That you'd start out as a junior something or other and work your way up over 5 to 10 years into a senior, highly skilled job. Tenure was not an issue. People generally stayed for long periods of time in companies. If they moved, it was for a very specific and usually good reason, not just money. That all changed in the 80s, and now we're paying the price for that with hundreds of people that to your point, don't have practical skills. But where the hell do you get those? University's never going to teach you practical skills. That's not their job. They don't have the capability to do that. Their job is to give you a basic knowledge about life in the world, a basic foundation to build on. And then somewhere you have to get that practical skill. And if the companies aren't willing to hire you and train you, then you're out on you're driving an Uber. And that's exactly what's happening right now in America. So when companies scream about they don't have skilled labor, it's their own fault. I have no sympathy. They need to start rebuilding corporate education programs. They need to restart learning and development inside the companies or partner with people that can do that externally for them. So, to say that universities are failing is completely wrong. The universities are excellent. The price of education is ridiculous. I totally agree with you there. And I think the pushback is huge. Many universities have gone out of business in the last 5 years since the pandemic. Hundreds. In fact, some that I have worked with in the past are no longer in existence, have merged with other schools because enrollments are way down. People aren't willing to pony up the money because they realize it's not worth it. So there's so many things going on and big structural changes in the economy, not just in education, but I think you're going to see an incredible revolution, I'll use that word, in how we look at the economy, whether it's a guaranteed income or whatever it is. AI and robotics are replacing more and more jobs, so that makes it even less likely that we're going to be able to ever employ these people. So we got big economic, social changes in the future.
I think it's fascinating to think about the incentives for private companies to train a workforce. Gone are the days of 30 years of service at a company and a gold watch and some RSUs and a pension. Do you think we'll ever get back to that?
No, we're not going to have very many people employed because whether we like it or not, we're going to have thousands of robots and software agents doing the work that most people do today. There will be people employed, but they're going to be in very specific niche areas. So your average company is going to be much smaller. I mean, I've been preaching this for a decade. It is going to happen. I'm just not sure when, but we're going to have smaller companies with many fewer people with very different skill sets than we have today. And the really big question is, what are we going to do with all these other people? That's the big question for society.
We see a lot of this efficiency already being squeezed in a manual process through offshoring and nearshoring and leveraging employer of record tools to hire talent to do jobs at half or a third of the wages it would take here in the US. I don't think we necessarily need the robots. I saw the video this morning of Boston Dynamics robot in a mailroom. I don't know if you saw that. But it's coming quickly. The robot stuff is fun. It's very science fiction-y. But I think what we've learned in the last 10 years, particularly with the gig economy, is we are the robots. Like Uber could have been a robotics company, but they realized if they caffeinate humans and humans are motivated by financial security, like we'll just do that robot vision work and run errands for people and drive people around. It's just not as pretty looking as the sci-fi movies made it out to be.
Yeah, I'm not sure I 100% agree with you. I think robots are going to be far more prevalent than you may think they are. I see San Francisco here where Waymo taxis are becoming the dominant form of taxi driving. Okay, I mean it's I don't know what the future of an Uber driver is, to be quite honest with you, because your next Uber may be a Waymo remote taxi. But beside the point, getting off from that, I mean, it's going to be a while before we're all replaced. Okay, robots are going to come and already are in certain specific places and applications, but generally speaking, they're not going to replace us completely, but they are going to augment us, so you don't need as many. A doctor using augmented tools for operating can do 3 operations a day instead of 1. All right. So you don't need quite as many doctors as you used to need. These things are going to continue to roll out and get more sophisticated as we, move forward. It's happening faster than I think we think it is. When I look at Perplexity and ChatGTP and some of these tools and the speed that they're evolving is just absolutely scary. Okay. So the AI future is definitely coming very rapidly. So again, I go back to the question is, what the hell are we going to be doing as human beings? And that is the real question. I mean, obviously there's a lot of theories about that. We could spend a lot of time talking about that, but imagine if you didn't have to worry about making money. Imagine if we taxed the companies that use robots to give us a percentage of their profits that we could then use to subsidize people so they didn't have to worry about a paycheck. What would you do? And I think when you ask people that, you find all sorts of creative, entrepreneurial ideas that come out, whether it's, being an artist, whether a musician, whether it's, taking care of aged people. There's all kinds of stuff that people would gladly do if they didn't have to worry about a paycheck and healthcare. So I think we have to think of the economics of going on here and how can that be redistributed or rethought? And that's a horrible thought for most people in America.
I appreciate your insight on how we could position efficiency through AI and robotics to implement universal basic income and have a completely different human experience. The story in which we are the characters is capitalism. Capitalism will absorb any time efficiency. And if we want to bring this back to recruiting, what that means is if you could recruit maybe 15 recs at a time, and now you're using tools like Perplexity or ChatGPT or some vendor wrapper LLM, and now you can do 20 to 25 recs at a time. That means we don't work less. That means we work more, and fewer people are going to be in the role of a recruiter. You've talked a lot about AI and recruiting. One of your recent articles is about the 8 stages of evolution. Let's start at the top with stage 8, where there are no recruiters and it's hiring managers leveraging AI as service as a software.
Yeah, I think that's reality for many, many jobs, probably a large percentage of jobs as we think about them today could be handled. I go back and make an analogy going back to the day when I was in HR and people said, people need to talk to an HR person. They want to go find out how many vacation days they have and, discuss their sick leave and so forth and so on. And we've completely gone to service. There's nobody that does that anymore. If you work in a company, you go to your computer, you ask how many vacation days do I have and tell me about this or that. It's all automated. And that changed the role of HR tremendously. Okay. Same thing is going to happen with a hiring manager. Today they go to their recruiter. But what if they didn't need to go to their recruiter? What if they had a simple, easy computer interface that they could just log into and it would deliver a reasonably good candidate to them pretty quickly, or several potential choices of candidates? That's reality. It can do that today. At the other end of the scheme, at the bottom of the scheme, we don't even need the hiring manager involved at all. We can just automatically let people get hired, which Amazon is doing already for their warehouse jobs, where there's no human involvement at all. You go to the computer, you apply for the job, you're screened by the AI technology. You're said, show up on Monday morning and here's your new job, right? So, we've got two ends of the spectrum. There's a place for recruiters definitely in there, but it's much more of an advisory, consultative, maybe talent orchestrator, talent planning kind of a role, which is what my stage is kind of outlined.
I like this idea of stage 7, where AI removes a lot of the tactical work and offloads that to allow recruiters to be strategic. Recruiting is often the type of role where you get good at the intangibles by doing the work itself. It's fun and easy to talk about recruiting because a lot of us have probably been involved in a hiring process as a hiring manager, interviewer, or as a candidate. So it's one of those fields where everybody has an opinion because they've experienced some toe in the pool of it. But good recruiters are good recruiters because they've recruited. So how do you think recruiters now can advance from that tactical recruiter to a strategic operator? And what do you think some of the challenges might be for somebody who is perhaps recruiting at a FANG where they're just a cog in a machine and they've got an RC, they've got a talent partner, they've got a sourcer, and they're just focused on screening candidates?
Oh, I think the computer is going to be screening the candidates myself. I think there's a huge role for recruiters as, talent intelligence people that can really understand the talent marketplace, can help the organization put together a talent plan that includes this workforce that we're talking about that's maybe part-time or dispersed. How many of those, what roles should be consultative versus permanent? What roles can be done by the computer? Somebody that can have those kind of discussions intelligently backed with data and facts and information. Somebody that can really help the company lay out a long-term strategy for where it's going to go and what kind of people is it going to need and how is it going to deal with the skills that it may need to have and how's it going to get those skills. So, a huge role for people to do that, whether you call that a recruiter, or I think the term recruiter maybe become archaic. We need other terms for what we do, but that's a huge role there for that. There's a huge role for just giving advice and counsel to candidates as well as hiring managers, okay? Let's say 85% of people can be hired with no human intervention whatsoever. But the other 15% is going to need handholding. They're going to need closing. They're going to need those conversations that you're kind of just have to get good at doing. And that requires a skill of understanding human psychology, human behavior, understanding the company, the culture. And those are going to remain human skills. But it's going to require a far fewer number of people to do those things than we have today. And they'll be augmented and helped with AI that's going to give them insight and information about the candidate and the hiring manager, and can help them to form better arguments, let's say, to help close a candidate. Those things we relied on historically with intuition and experience. If you don't have the experience and the intuition, then you're going to rely on AI to help you.
I appreciate that you mentioned the candidate experience and hiring workflow for Amazon. We're also seeing this right now in logistics, and there is a bit of a battle going on between Fountain and Paradox, between UPS and FedEx hiring, particularly for seasonal jobs where they're going to hire 100,000 folks each. It's crazy. At HR Tech, the UPS was talking about like how they're going to hire probably 20 to 30,000 without an interview. And on the website at the time, the call to action on the careers page was get hired in 20 minutes. Now it's down to 10. HR Tech was a month and a half ago, so you can wonder why the hiring process has reduced by half. But it's pretty crazy. And what that tells me is there is a key decision-making process in that candidate and hiring funnel. I'm sure you can guess what it is, but it's the background check. Is this a safe person that we can assume risk on? So
Right.
all of those AI hiring efficiency processes are rooted in that risk mitigation. One of the pieces that you publish on is the use of blockchain. I think blockchain is going to be a fascinating way we obtain information about work history, and that can be done through work confirmation in terms of like dates and employment status, background checks. What are some of your theses around how blockchain could be used in hiring?
I mean, it could pretty much verify everything that's on your CV today. Okay. I mean, it can verify your educational background. It can verify your certificates, credentials, whatever you might have. It can verify your past employment, your salary history. It can verify your experience levels. Even if let's say you're a coder and you've taken a skill test, that skill test can be in there, so it can verify your skills. So all of this it can be put into the blockchain, and then recruiter or hiring manager or the AI can use that to verify and validate your credentials, your safety, your criminal background, whatever it is, can all be in that blockchain. And Australia is leading the way in this. Their company, Chronos, I can't remember the exact name of it, but they're one of the leading providers of blockchain for recruiters right now. So it's interesting where it's coming from. Australia is the last place I would expect it to be coming from, but again, they're more focused on privacy and verification of these things than maybe we've been. So I think without any doubt, blockchain had a brief, fantasy period 5 years ago, and this disappeared, but it's coming back now in reality. And MIT, Harvard, many universities are already putting your degree into the blockchain. So these are companies already starting to use it. IBM and others are using blockchain. So it's slowly becoming more mainstream than it was. It'll be a while before, the average recruiter is probably able to tap into it or use it. But we're getting there. It definitely will be coming.
What governing body should have the responsibility for maintaining the blockchain for such important information?
Yeah, well, it's good. I mean, right now, the governing entity is the source, the university, the company, whatever it is, okay? And once it's in there, it can never be removed. So, that's the immutable nature of the blockchain, as they call it. And it means whatever is in there cannot be corrected. It cannot be removed. It can be amended. You can add, this was true, but it's not true now, but you can't ever get rid of that. It's in there. It's kind of like your memory. You're never going to forget the bad thing, but you can overcome it, right? So I look at the blockchain kind of like a human memory. If somebody disses you, you'll never forget it, but you may not use it to make your judgment about that person. Right? So the governing body right now is only the source of the data, right? That's it. So the criminal justice system, the legal system, the university system, the company that you work for will verify your salary. And that means probably an AI agent ultimately will be verifying it. Right now it's a human. But I don't think there'll be any overarching regulatory body. It'll be a variety of different sources that verify that stuff.
I think if there were an overarching regulatory body, we might be getting into Larry Ellison's world and the future that is being spoken about as we think about artificial intelligence taking over every aspect of humanity as we know it. This is a bit of a hot take. I appreciate what you just said about if somebody disses you, you never forget it, but it doesn't necessarily inform your judgment of that person. When we talk about artificial intelligence in recruiting products at RecFest, Scotty AI had a fascinating demonstration. Stan started that presentation by introducing himself with a joke that missed the mark. And he said, "This is the technology that's going to replace you," to a room of 200 recruiters. And we all looked around like, what? And if you've never met Stan, he's a very high energy guy. He did great work at Smart Recruiters.
I know
What up,
Stan.
Stan? Stan's great. But and that missed joke doesn't necessarily frame my judgment around Stan personally, but it makes me think, how do these innovators, how do these founders interact with practitioners who are learning AI at such different marks on the AI learning curve? That might have been really scary for somebody in that room who logged into Chat GPT for the first time a week before RecFest. But for somebody like you or I, or folks that are advising competing products in the marketplace, it was a fun moment. So how do you think founders and vendors can interact more with the people that actually do the work of recruitment?
I think Stan's learning. He was just in Australia with me, and he presented his to 300 recruiters. His scary, you're out of a job. Your future is Scotty, right? And obviously they were scared, really scared. But then he spent a lot of time after that talking individually with lots of people, as did myself and others, kind of mitigating that and saying, yeah, but well, maybe not completely, or there's other roles for you. I think founders, that's the role of a founder. I mean, founders, whether you're an Elon Musk saying the cars are going to be self-driving, or you're Scotty saying that everybody's going to be recruited by Scotty, the role of a founder is to be scary and out there and so forth and so on. That's their job. Okay. They can't help it anyways, because they're so excited and enthusiastic about their product that it's part of their life. I think what the job is of other people is to explain a little bit more, mitigate their story, fill in the nuances and say, yeah, well, maybe in 100 years or whatever, but not right now. Every inventor, everything has said it's going to completely change the world, and rarely does it do that, but it does make a profound difference. So I think the whole thing is, if you're hearing somebody like that as a person, you need to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, right? And just say, not really sure this is exactly what's going to happen, but it's interesting and a bit scary to think that it could, right? So partly it's the responsibility of the recruiter to understand this and figure out where it's actually going to play a part in their life. But it's also our your job, my job, anybody that's an influencer, anybody who communicates to the larger community, it's our job to help explain what the reality is.
I agree, because that goes back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation around people having skills and thinking for themselves. And we want recruiters to be smart, intelligent people capable of critical thinking. But on any given day, if you log into LinkedIn or other social platforms, it's just this divisiveness. And we've seen this dilution of cognitive, respectful, intelligent discourse. I think a lot of us, myself included, wish LinkedIn particularly was a place for more intriguing dialogue. And for a lot of us who've been around the recruiting space, it kind of was. Now it seems like we've brought in all the crazies from Facebook, the Reddit anti-work mob, And heck, even the Gen Z creators out here doing TikTok videos, it's an evolving platform. But 10
Yeah.
years ago was when they moved to a news feed. And there's a lot of folks that have just been out here happily building community, publishing thought leadership, asking provoking questions. That's the stuff that the algorithm doesn't value anymore, which is why it's important to have newsletters and podcasts and have
Well,
these conversations and ask difficult questions and gather as a community. If we're not going to do those things and collectively grow, there's a million other ways to make a living.
yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, I think community is really the key. Where can you sit and discuss these things in a rational, thoughtful way? Whether it's at a at an event like HR Tech or whether it's just at a coffee shop somewhere. I think that's why these like Bill Borman's Trues, if you're familiar with those, the True London, True Amsterdam. These are very informal, unscripted get-togethers of recruiters just to talk about issues and have people like you and me present maybe in a very informal way and then have a discussion around that. I think those are really valuable things. We need a lot more of those. Like you said, LinkedIn used to be that way online. We don't really have an online forum that's universal to do that. We have many small ones. But I think that still get together face to face, have these sort of chats locally, build a community where you are of other recruiters. That's really important. And let's face it, our profession is definitely changing. AI is definitely going to have an impact on it. Our roles are not going to be the same 5 years from today. And many of us will no longer be recruiters 5 years from today, but some of us will be. And those that will be will have developed a new set of skills and an appreciation and understanding of AI. I think that's the most important thing.
I agree. And it comes through a sense of curiosity and humility. At the end of the day, to me, that's what recruiting is about. Like, can we get curious, doing research, finding the right talent, identifying talent density, skills in the market, communicating with stakeholders, and also having humility. I mean, like, let's be honest, if we weren't doing this humble work, like we could probably go make twice as much money working in enterprise software sales.
Yeah.
But when I look
Or,
at other recruiters that have had longevity in their career, it really comes down to the fact that they're rooted in relationships and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of generosity in the space. I mean, like people passing the torch, passing knowledge, like my phone blows up with folks that I used to just fanboy and read their content. That's one of the things that I have recommended to recruiters is to like invest in getting out into the community. Career Crossroads used to have a huge following. SourceCon used to have a huge following. It's getting more granular in those communities, but the relationships are more robust and the learnings. That was some of the feedback that I received from people who went out to SourceCon a couple weeks back. They said it was smaller, but it was more intimate and more enjoyable. So I think we're going to see more of those micro communities.
Yeah, I'm going to be at ERE next week, and I think that will be another smaller. I mean, I look at RecFest and HR Tech, and they're humongous, and they're mind-boggling in a way in their size and scope, but there's not much community. So I think places like SourceCon, ERE, some of these smaller conferences are definitely a better place to have those kind of conversations and build those relationships. So I kind of look forward to being at ERE. I hadn't been to ERE for several years until earlier this year. I was in Austin, and 200 or 300 people, maybe not even that many. It was great. You really get to meet a lot of people and have good conversations. So I look forward to this one in Anaheim next week. Should be good.
Absolutely. I remember a couple of years back, it was in 2022, CNBC published an article, and the number one career choice for Gen Z was corporate recruiter.
Really? I didn't see that. Wow, I didn't see that.
Second was marketing manager. Third was social media marketer. The through line between those three career choices is storytelling. I think people as humans have this desire to craft narrative and tell a story. And that's where we're headed in the future of recruitment. Is it's more about storytelling, more about being an ambassador for the brand and identifying some of those intangibles to influence human behavior. Those traits right now that recruiters have are doing that through conversation. So I think we are going to still see conversation. But what do you see as like the future of recruiting? I know Chris Long has some cool job titles out there, but like if we think about recruiting and recruiting coordinator being an entry level role, how do you think more young people can get involved in this profession despite the changes?
It's interesting. It's a really interesting question. I've thought about this a lot. I'm not sure that it's a profession for a new college grad. I don't think that's a profession. It used to be, maybe. You could be a coordinator and schedule interviews and whatever. That's going to be done by AI.
Yeah.
I think this is a profession for people that have some years of living under their belt. I'm not sure where they're going to come from. I'm sure we'll figure out where that is. Maybe they'll come from sales. Maybe they'll come from a marketing background from somewhere. But you do need people that can tell stories and build relationships, and that requires for most. If we agree that 85% of hires are going to be recruited by computers, those 15% that are not are more mature, experienced people probably, and they're going to want to talk to somebody who's equally mature and can have the right kind of conversation with them. And that means you're going to have people that have lived for a while, experienced things, have psychology and intuition. It's where the headhunter world used to be, right? The really good headhunters were all, 40 plus years old, right? And they'd all been around for a while, and they knew how to build those relationships. And I think that's what recruiting is going to be. So entry-level recruiting is going to be at a higher level, at a higher age level, a maturity level. I don't think it's going to be a profession for a Gen Z out of college.
I agree. And I appreciate your sobering observation and the courage to say that, because not a lot of people are. There are many recruiters and analysts and consultants that are whistling in the dark about the future state. So I appreciate the healthy pragmatism there, Kevin. One of the pieces you talk a lot about is internal mobility, learning and development, transferable skills. And I agree. I think I've seen it firsthand where I know a recruiter and she was a killer in sales and she jumped over to recruiting and now she's a phenomenal recruiter and she's probably at that 6-year, 7-year mark. So I think we'll see those on-ramps for recruiters. It's just going to be through transferable skills, L&D, internal mobility.
Absolutely. I think that's where it's going to come from. And it's probably going to be something that's more informal than formal, right? People like the woman in sales probably didn't ever say, I'm going to be a recruiter. It sort of just happened, right? And I think that's going to be the way it should work. Okay. That's the way it used to work in the old days. I think a lot of people got into real recruiting as a recruiter through other paths in the organization, right? And I'm not sure you can even train people for it. I know there's people trying to give recruiter training classes. I'm not sure that's a viable path. Number one, things change so quickly that I'm not sure the curriculum is even relevant. And even if it is relevant, I don't think this is something you learn from school. This is something you learn by doing, right?
Yes.
So I think it's the very best recruiters I know are all people that just have really great human relationship skills, storytelling, sense of humor, insight into human psychology, and they got that through life. They didn't get that from Harvard. All right. So that's what I think a good recruiter is going to take. And I think there'll be a lot fewer of them. And internal mobility is a huge issue for companies. I think, theoretically, there should be no need for a company to recruit anybody externally.
Oh, that's fascinating.
IBM hardly ever did. I look at IBM and General Electric as my bellwether companies that I use to talk about this, because historically they only hired new college grads, and they hired sometimes 30 or 40 a year. That's it. And then they trained everybody internal, and everybody at IBM was a 30-year person. Everybody had been there for a long period of time. Okay, so they didn't have recruiters. IBM had no real recruiting function until the 80s. They had no need for it. They did college recruitment. That was it. So I think you look back and say, how did companies used to do it? They did it through internal mobility and training and development inside their company. And they knew what their needs were. They could see that we need people to operate this computer that we just invented, and no school even knows we have it. So we've got to train people how to run this thing, because no school is going to know how to train them to run this thing, right? So, it was a matter of necessity as much as, there were no schools of programming when IBM invented the first computer. Okay, So somebody had to teach them how to do that stuff. I started my career in the semiconductor industry. Okay. Just to give you a little story, all the equipment was never existed before. And one of my very first jobs was training people how to run this equipment that was brand new. There were no manuals. There was no history. The engineer who invented the machine taught me how to run it and said, now you know how to run it. You teach other people how to run it. Okay. That was my very first job at like 28 years old after being a high school teacher. So I ended up teaching people how to run these machines. And the only thing I knew about it was from the engineer who built it. So, I mean, this is we're in that kind of same space with AI. Schools can't teach you this stuff because they don't know it yet. But somebody like Sam Altman has to teach you how to use AI effectively. So we're back into this internal training mode, I think, big time. And if companies don't embrace this, they're going to not be successful.
That's interesting. Presumably, IBM and General Electric had to begin recruiting because there was more competition in the market from their competitors. So the recruitment motion was a response to their talent being poached to go to other companies, other upstarts, other innovative technology firms. When I think about learning from a machine, I was just out in Los Angeles and I was in Highland Park and I walked past this carpet manufacturing corner store and they had this big machinery and a couple of guys that were working on it. And I had been off my computer for a couple of days and it was just a fascinating time to think and stare at this window shop and be like, wow, there's like this weird piece of machinery that I've never seen that a couple people know how to use. Are they going to train a couple of folks in their family or in the neighborhood to be an apprentice to learn how to use this 80-year-old piece of machinery? What happens when it breaks down? Who's manufacturing the parts? So I think what you're talking about learning how to use proprietary technology is fascinating. But when we look at the application and the skill sets and the requirements of these jobs at generative AI companies, those skills are able to be learned through software engineering, and the systems in which they produce this technology are more standardized using a universal skill set. By the time this publishes, Tesla will be a $1 trillion company. Tesla hires and fires people left and right. They can go out in the market and replace somebody for 10% less payroll if they decided to. I don't know. Those are just some thoughts.
Most people that Tesla's replacing are going to be roboticized. I hate to say it. I just looked at a factory in China where they build BYD electric cars. There's almost nobody in the factory. I mean, there's like nobody. All right. It's completely automated. So the American manufacturing is going to go that way too. I hate to say that, but it's true. So I think as far as AI goes, you can learn data science and programming and certain skills in school. But I still think there's a whole hidden body of internal proprietary knowledge that you can only learn by working at ChatGPT. Okay. And somebody is going to have to teach you that stuff. So it's kind of an apprentice thing, right? So somebody is at ChatGPT is going to say, Brandon, look, let's do it this way. I'm going to show you something, right? You never learned in school. Now, yeah, sure, you got the basic skill. You got the basic programming knowledge, just like you have the basic knowledge from any university. But it's only good for about a day. And then you have to start learning other stuff, right? So the half-life of a college degree is probably more like a month. We used to say 5 years. I think it's about a month. But the basic stuff is going to be there, obviously, right? So I think almost everything we learn. I used to work with a guy named Jay Cross, who unfortunately passed away, but he was the inventor of the term informal learning and wrote several books on informal learning. And his thesis was everything we learn by doing, okay, basically, right? And what universities are good for is giving you that basic knowledge of the foundation to build everything else on. It's just like the foundation of your house. But to build the walls, put in the windows, put in the plumbing and electricity, that's stuff you don't learn in university. That's stuff you learn on the job by doing it. I think that's true for every company that exists, okay? So you hire people with some very fundamental basic skills, and then you give them that proprietary knowledge within the company, hopefully. And that's internal mobility. That's what it's all about. And somewhere we lost that in the last 10 or 15 years ago, we lost it. And so all we do is we play musical chairs. We chase around the few people who know those things, and we bring them from company to company at increasing salaries. And we have this, we say there's a talent shortage, but there isn't. So it's kind of a Mad Hatter dash. And we need to restop and recalibrate and rethink about what's going on. I think that's happening.
There was a report that the Boston Consulting Group put out stating that the half-life on our work skills in tech is about 2.5 years. That's fascinating, because if we are going to continue to print degrees and print payroll and print layoff announcements and just burn through a workforce, the responsibility comes on how do we make sure that we appreciate the people who are doing the work at the companies for the time they are there, celebrate their accomplishments, and provide a healthy, safe work atmosphere so that they can take those skills and learnings to their next opportunity. Because I'm with you, I don't think we could put the genie back in the bottle in terms of 30 years of career and a gold watch.
No.
But when it comes to upskilling and learning, we're going to do that in new ways. It's not necessarily going to be from top-down L&D departments or from your manager. There's going to be more of this idea of informal L&D and informal mentorship. And I think there's responsibility to be put on the candidate and the employee for self-directed discovery, learning, pattern matching, and skills advancement, because no one is more invested in our careers than ourselves.
That's true. And I don't disagree with you. I do think, however, that we historically in the 80s, we put all the burden on the candidate. We said, you got to go get the skills you need. You got to go do the learning. I think that's bullshit, because the candidate doesn't know what skills they need to go get. They don't know, they don't have that insight into what the company needs. That's the proprietary stuff we're talking about inside, right? So I think the big question we have today in the market is, who is responsible? Is it the universities? Is it the government? Is it the candidate? Is it the company? Who's responsible for this? And my thesis is the primary responsibility is the company. That is the primary source of income. That is the primary employer. They have the primary responsibility to create the workforce they need. And if they want to partner with the universities to help them do that, that's fine. But they're not partnering. They're abdicating. And when you abdicate, you get what you get, okay? And so I have no truck when companies complain that they don't have any skilled labor. It's their own fault. And if they want to create skilled labor, then create skilled labor. Create an environment that invites that. Create the opportunity for people to do that, okay? So I may be I may sound a little zealot here, but I really do believe companies totally gave up their responsibility and said, oh, you guys take care of it so we can make millions. And they're paying the price big time. And nobody else can take that responsibility on. Nobody else knows what they need. I don't know what they need. They don't know. The candidate doesn't know what they need for skills. That's why candidates send in applications they're not qualified for, because they have no idea what the company's actually really looking for. So I don't blame the candidate. I really don't. Yes, once they're in the company, they have a responsibility to take whatever opportunity there is there, right? They definitely have that. They need to take that responsibility. They need to step up to the plate and say, I want to learn this. I want to be engaged, right? But when you're outside the company, I don't think it's your fault.
Well, I'm sure we could go another 30 minutes on skills-based hiring, but let's put a pin in that for now. The last question I want to ask you, Kevin, is, are you hopeful for the future of work?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be much more empowering and much more interesting once AI takes over a lot of the mundane crap, okay? And we find a way to free people up to explore their passions and their creativity. And I think it's a matter of just a political willingness to do this. And I think it's going to be a rough road. It's not going to be a short-term road. We're going to go through a period of really huge turmoil, another decade maybe. I hate to say that, of very tough times. But after that, I think things will smooth out and we'll be in a new era, and I think it'll be an era that will be very human.
Well, you said it earlier. Recruiters are a resilient group.
Hopefully.
Thank you for joining me today on the podcast. It's been an absolute treat.
Always fun to talk to you, Brandon. Hope we do it again.